Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on The Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. Today, as usual, we have another fantastic guest. And if you have kids or thinking about having kids, you've got to watch this show because we have a guest that's going to come on the show and we're going to talk about ways that we can raise healthy kids, the issue with social media and how that's affecting your kids. My kids are grown, so I can't say mine, but my grandbabies, we got to watch them. But before we get to him, if you have not subscribed to the Father Show with Mike Thompson YouTube channel, I ask that you would go there, hit that subscription button, and while you're there, hit that like button. And don't forget to tell others that we are here and we are here to help our men really be the best versions that they can be. And so if you're looking for resources, go to thefathershowwithmikethompson.com. Click on resources, and there you will find resources that can help you in your journey to be the best version of yourself. So today we have, like I said, one heck of a great guest. I am so pleased to have him. He is someone I came across, but when I saw the books that he was writing, I really wanted to get him on the show because I think it's very important that we understand the ramifications that we are doing to our kids with social media, letting them have phones as, early as 1-2 years old, and all that. So we're going to talk about that. But today, our guest is Tom Kirsten, and Tom is a psychotherapist and a nationally renowned mental health expert and lecturer. He is the author of Disconnected: How to Protect Your Kids from the Harmful Effects of Device Dependency, and his latest book, Raising Healthy Teenagers: Equipping Your Child to Navigate the Pitfalls and Dangers of Teen Life, which comes out in February. Tom is a regular guest expert on many national television, news, and talk shows where he offers insight and advice about parenting, relationship, and wellness. He is the founder and owner of Valley Family Counseling Center in Park Ridge, New Jersey. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's get to talking with Tom because I really have a lot of questions and I know he has a lot to say and I really want to make sure he has time to say it. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Tom. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Good. It's glad to have you. I've read a little bit about your book and I've seen some videos of you, talking about the book. And I know the Raising Healthy Teenagers is your new book and coming out in February. But I want to dab into a little bit of Disconnected. And if I'm correct, you have two books entitled Disconnected: How to Protect Your Child from Dangerous Devices and Dependency, and also How to Reconnect Our Digital Distracted Kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, actually, it's just the first edition. So
it's just first edition.
Yeah, the new one that just came out 2 years ago. Disconnected: How to Protect Your Kids from this one right there, Harmful Effects of Device Dependency. And it really just, I'm one of the pioneers in that space, starting back in 2009. In fact, when I was working in schools, when I started going out lecturing about the potential concept of screen media and what it's going to be doing to kids' brains neurologically, their social skills, mental health, and so forth. And here we are. And I've been out pounding the pavement, lecturing all over the country, for many years now, and writing books and so forth.
Yeah. Now, how has your response been to your audience when you have brought this up to their attention?
Yes. So when I'm speaking, particularly or doing TV segments and stuff, And I'm very passionate about this. I have kids myself. They're getting older too, 19 and 6. But most people it's kind of like their jaws are dropping. A lot of
Hmm.
parents when they're in the audience and I'm going over, specific stories and statistics and so forth. A little bit of fear, and my goal isn't to, instill fear upon them. It's to them up and to, and offer, real simple strategies on how to prevent your kid from getting sucked into this deep, dark vortex,
Hmm.
called social media and screen time. So, it's always a work in progress, but, for the most part, really, they after I'm done, they come up and they say, that was a fantastic lecture, and we're going to start making this in our household ASAP.
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted to do this, because I see, like I'm sure everyone, we all go out to dinner and you see the kids sitting there playing with their phones or an iPad or whatever, and the parents are off doing their own, talking about something else, doing their own thing, not really paying attention to the child because they got a device to keep the child busy. And I know they're doing it not just at the restaurant or while they're in public. I know they do it at home too. And I can see from being a dad myself that that's got to be a problem.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because in Disconnected, I have a section in the book called Parenting from a Distance. And it's happening everywhere. So I speak of families when I'm doing lectures and stuff. I'll explain that when we hear the word family, it's no longer definitive of
Hmm.
like people being together, family of four, hanging out, cooking together, having dinner. It's more like four individuals living under the same roof, but living
Yeah.
solitary lives in their own room in front of their own screen. And it happens. And here's a statistic too. This will people are gonna that are listening right now. Your eyes are gonna raise. Your eyebrows are gonna raise. The average parent nowadays spends just 3.5 minutes per week in meaningful conversation with their children. And it's
Per
because
week?
we adults are distracted by these devices as well. And so are our children. And it happens not just, but even in the car ride. Like when I was taking my school, look in the rear view mirror, pulling into it's the same scene. The kid in the past has their head down and they're on their phone. And that's now, so it's severing the relationship, parent and child. These phones are hijacking, our children from us. So we have
Hmm.
to establish rules. We have to establish rules. And I'll be happy to go over those with right now.
Please do.
Yeah. So a couple of those rules, ones that I find to be very important, is parents have to practice what they preach. So when we are at home, okay, we have to be aware of what we're doing. And that means we have to put down our phones, our computers, and so forth, and be in the presence, right? Number two, when if we are having dinner together around the table, remove all distractions. Next, make a rule that when you're taking your kid to school or to sports practice or whatever it might be, that they're not allowed to be on that phone in that car. Communicate. And it might not seem like much, but a 5-minute ride to and from school, 180 a year, is probably the most important thing for the mental health of that child, because the parents and the connection in the relationship is the most important thing for securing strong mental well-being in our. We have to be there. And finally, anybody listening right now, if you have kids, preteens, teens, do not allow that phone to stay in that bedroom at night.
Hmm.
And I don't care what kind of, what your kid, if you're afraid right now to go home and tell your 15 or 16-year-old, that's it, the phone's going downstairs at night. If you don't do it, you're gonna pay the price.
Now, what price would they pay? What's the long-term effect that's going to be on that child?
Yeah. So here's the deal. So kids now, like almost every kid, right, that's a preteen or teen, has a phone, and it stays in their bedroom with them at night. So
Hmm.
a few years ago, I collected some data. All right. And I asked, when I was working at a public high school at the time. And over the course of a year, I asked 100 kids that knew me, right, and trusted me, 100 students in my office. I said, I'm going to ask you a question, and please answer this question honestly. It's not going to leave my office. I'm not even going to use your name. I'm just trying to collect data. And the question I asked them was, what time do you go to sleep on school nights? And 90 something, I think 94 or 95 out of those 100, that they went to bed between 1 and 4 a.m. every night of the school week, and that their parents had no idea. So as a result, we have a sleep deprivation epidemic in
Hmm.
America. We have among teens, a sleep deprivation epidemic. So you want to talk about mental health, and that's what my book goes into, is how screen time and everything has literally caused this mental health epidemic. But just take that out of the equation, and we just talk about sleep deprivation, right? That
Mm-hmm.
alone, just that, is going to cause substantial anxiety, possibly depression. You can't function. A person that's exhausted can't function. They can't
Yeah.
be in a good mood. They can't listen. And they can't do anything. So it's just the long-term effects are going to be, potential substantial mental health issues.
And then people really have to understand that. And because if you think about it, you got like Navy SEALs, they are trained to work and produce past their exhaustion level. And that's something you have to be trained for. So if your kid is really exhausted and you're asking them to go to school and learn something, that's not going to work.
No. I mean, that brain, that executive functioning part of the brain, forget it. If you're exhausted, the ability, and not only that, what these doing, something called neuroplasticity, I talk about that in the book, it's actually changing brain neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids diagnosed with attention deficit that are like teenagers don't actually have attention deficit disorder. They have the symptoms of it. That's a whole nother topic. You have to read the first sentence.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm not a psychotherapist, but I've seen that be put out there really. It's like you jump on a bandwagon. If you have a problem with a child, you just go, oh, he's got ADHD. You don't really look at the symptoms and why that they may have those symptoms. You just want to label them and call it a day.
Yeah. And what people don't realize, this is how I got into this topic back in 2009 when I had this high school kid, parents come in for a meeting and they tell us that their 14-year-old was just diagnosed with ADHD. I was like, what? So what people don't realize is that attention deficit disorder is a neurological condition that a person is born with, right? You don't get it. You're born with it, right? It's like, and the average age of diagnosis is 8 years old. And if a parent has a child with ADHD, by the time they are 5, you can't not notice it, right? Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden you see a 14 or 15-year-old getting diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, but there were no symptoms, previously, something's wrong there because they don't have attention deficit. That's what neuroplasticity is as it relates to this, because, neuroplasticity is as follows. Any human being that is engaged in a highly stimulating activity for 3 hours or more per day on a consistent basis, the brain will grow pathways to adapt to that environment, and it will prune away pathways that are not being utilized. So, for example, kids are spending 8 or 9 hours a day in front of a screen, the most highly stimulating stuff there is. And that pathway that you need in order to, to be a good listener, to be able to concentrate, to be able to focus, to be organized and so forth, is probably compromised from this neuroplasticity and this excess screen time. So you got a kid that's sitting in a classroom right now, and their brain is just, it can't sit and focus because it's been so used to getting stimulated all day long. Then the teacher's trying to teach math, and now it appears that they have attention deficit disorder, but they don't in many cases.
And that stimulus, what is stimulating their brain? Is it the smart device or the game unit, and that's what their brain is getting used to? So when they go into a class and it's so different because the structure of it is different, is that why they're having the problem paying attention and laying in these notes?
That's part. Imagine you're spending 8 or 9 days just entertained doing most of the stuff you can do, right? And you're doing that 7 days a week, 60 hours a week roughly, right? And now you sit in the classroom and Mrs. let history or trying to teach you algebra it doesn't seem very pleasurable, in comparison. Yeah. But the other part of this, Mike, is, social media apps, video games, right? They're developed to target the pleasure-seeking part of the brain that produces dopamine, right? And dopamine is the feel-good chemical, and it's the chemical that is tied to every addiction, right? So these apps and video games are designed to target. So our kids are getting 8 or 9 hours a day. It's like a dopamine drip. And what happens, it's like a scale. There becomes an imbalance. And you don't want, the brain has something that keeps the balance where you don't get too much dopamine or too little, and it's called homeostasis. Once there's an imbalance, which is what's occurring, and all of a sudden mom and dad come and say, all right, that's it, give me the phone or give me the video game system. What's the reaction from that kid? Same reaction that you get from a crack addict if you took their crack away. Crazy. And they start punching, they freak out. And that's the withdrawal effect.
And you've heard of kids that have gone off on the deep end because their parents has taken their game unit away from them, or their phone for that matter.
A kid a few years ago, 15-year-old, was spending like 10 hours, didn't even go to school for like a year, was playing video game. Took my advice and took the system away, and I told him to be prepared because the kid was going to go crazy, and he did. And then he wound up taking out, grabbing his dad's $3,000 guitar, putting the blade to the guns and demanding his back. So that's withdrawal behavior, And I talk about actually my next book that's coming out, Raising Healthy Teenagers. I talk about something called oppositional defiant disorder. So I'm seeing so much more of that now. My private, it's called ODD, and it's kids that are just defiant, mean, rude, and oppositional towards authority, and in this mainly their parents. And it seems that the common denominator, I see kids like saying things to their parents, others that I wouldn't even repeat on the show for that matter. And the common denominator is always took the phone away, or they took the gaming system away, and you have like little Johnny now turns into a total demon.
Now, could that ODD be from not just smartphones and game units? Could it be from a life experience that you've had that was dramatic?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it could be, a lot of it has to do with parenting, define and so forth. How will you raise and so forth? Some of it is kind of biological, but in the present moment, been around oppositional, but the escalation of it now, like seeing so much more of it, it's in my anecdotal experience working with families and kids, it seems to be more connected, with these devices and that craving, that brain craving that dopamine. But certainly, there's adverse situations and stuff, and how it gets brought up, that can definitely lead to the
Yeah. Because I honestly had not heard of ODD until just recently. And, I was like, what? ODD? What is it?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's really, back a number of years ago, it would, in order to be, give us of that, it would a kid that is oppositional and defiant toward the authority figure, right? Not just parents, because that's kind of sometimes normal, right? But now, kind of crossed the line where this opposition and defiance, it's not. I remember when I was a kid, my parents told me I didn't, whatever, can't do this or that, I would never like curse at my mother or father ever. That would not go down well. You know what I mean? Or punch a hole in the wall. That would not go over well.
Yeah,
I'm sure you probably had the same experience.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it today.
Yep.
Yeah. Now,
and another thing, Mike, that I think I know you had mentioned earlier before we got on that you have grandkids, right?
Yes.
So I'm starting to see now. And I've been doing this work for many years, and I'm starting to see now that a lot of the stuff is like my work, my lectures, these podcasts and my books and stuff are really reaching a grandparent audience now, because the grandparents come from a different generation, and they're seeing like, whoa, my grandkid is just, I go see my son and daughter, and my 3-year-old grandkid is hypnotized by a screen 24 hours a day.
Yeah, we see it, and then the worst part of it, a lot of grandparents are now raising their grandkids.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, both parents work, so forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or whatever issues might be happening in the household. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah. So it's something, and when we were growing up, that wasn't something you were going to see. One, it wasn't invented yet, so you weren't going to have us sitting down in front of a smartphone all day just playing with it. But I've seen so many kids that really don't know. And I'm going to ask you, I hear kids so many times now say that you disrespect me, but you're the one that's in the wrong. Somebody's trying to tell you something, but you're saying they disrespect you. Is that, the newer ways going through your brain, you have not developed recognizing what you are doing incorrectly?
Well, I think it's, I mean, when you, Mike, I think it's that there are a lot of kids nowadays have just become entitled. They think the world,
Yeah, that's true.
And, so if a kid was to say to me, you don't, or whatever, you're disrespecting me, right? That's their interpretation. I mean, I would probably say you haven't earned respect yet because you haven't accomplished anything in life. You haven't done anything for the world yet. You haven't deserved, to be respected. Tell me what you've accomplished. You know what I mean? You understand my point. It's like, you have to, like, you and me demand respect because we're adults, right? We've worked hard our lives, right? We've earned that, right? So until you've earned, something or accomplished something or done something for the good of the world, you're not entitled to be respected by anybody.
And we have gone away from that at one point, and I think it's changed because even, all the kids felt entitled that, even when you were playing sports, everybody won. No, everybody didn't win. But we didn't want to say there's a loser and there's a winner. And we just wanted everybody to feel warm and cozy and fuzzy when that's not life.
Yeah, that's that trophy generation mentality, right?
Yeah.
Nobody could feel any pain or failure, right? But the truth is, in order to succeed, you have to fail first.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. To get somewhere, there's bumps in the road. So, if we're just smoothing everything out for our kids, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. They have to go out into the real world. Let's say they go to college and they get their first job, and the boss says, "Hey, this report you did isn't good. Sorry." You're gonna have to be able to deal with that. That's emotional intelligence. So, there's got to be some pain that our kids have to feel.
And so you mentioned emotional intelligence. What's the difference between the IQ and the EQ?
It's interesting. I talk about that in the book, in fact. So your IQ, your intelligence quotient, right, is pretty relatively fixed. So if somebody's born with an IQ of 110, right, you could go to the library and read every book, cover to cover, but you're not getting your IQ to 160, right? Okay. You're not going to be a genius. It's just the way it is, right? It's the same way. If you're, 30 years old and you're 5'10", you're not getting yourself to 6'4", right? It's not going to happen. Now the EQ. Now, your EQ, which is your emotional quotient, also known as emotional intelligence, okay, is the ability to understand one's emotions, it's the ability to regulate your emotions, it's the ability to empathize with the emotions of others, it's the ability of a recent college graduate, for example, whose GPA isn't even all that good, to go on a job interview and just blow these people away by their very presence. Now, here's the difference. IQ is fixed, you're born with it. EQ is not fixed, you're not born with it. Emotional intelligence, to develop that, which is actually twice as important for life success, having a high EQ versus a high IQ, is not something you're born with. It's something that is developed. And the way in which it is developed, the only way in which it is developed is through face-to-face. Lots of human beings. And our kids have very little bit of that nowadays.
Yeah, because you, like you said, you're spending, and I can't believe that when you said it, the statistic at 3.5 minutes a week with our children.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
Meaningful conversation. Yeah.
But that's still crazy. I mean, we've got, and I know we come in a busy world and everybody, especially in this economy right now, everybody's working, mom and dad is working. But you have got to come together and spend time with your kids.
There's nothing more important than that. There is nothing more important than that, sitting there and being, and just being in the presence of one another. And it's not even, you don't even have to get too deep. Just be in the presence of your day-to-day. Good, yeah, I'm glad. Hey, congratulations that you did well on that test and so forth. Just being there. Like I drive my daughter, she's 16, to school. She was in high school. She's a sophomore. So I drive her every morning. 6:30 in the morning, or I could drive her like 7:05. So I want sleep. Plus, it's a 15-minute drive. For me, it's just great quality time. Your makeup on in the past, your early stuff, but there's a dialogue and there's no phone. We're not talking, hardcore, deep conversation time, but sometimes we do. We talk about some important topics, and you add that up, 15 minutes a day. There are 180 school days a year. That's probably one of the most important things in her development. Being with her dad.
And I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that even for fathers and sons, the best time to have a conversation with your son is in the car while you're driving.
Yeah, yeah. But the problem is, you go look in a car next time you're driving around. If there's a teenager, just go park by a high school, you'll see that every single kid in that passenger seat with their parents is like this. There's no dialogue. No dialogue. And even adults, like they pull up to the traffic light, as soon as they were addicted to these things. The phone to me last week when I was driving my daughter to school. And it's like, I have this 2-minute window. And if we leave the house at 7:10, between 7:05 and 7:10, it's like that. If we leave at 7:11, it's going to take me an extra 10 or 15 minutes. That's how much traffic happens. And so we get to this light, first light, and I'm behind this big van, right? Big black van. And I can't even see what's in front of the big black van. And light turns green. And then I see a car turn right, make a right. And I'm waiting for the van, but it's not moving because I think maybe there's a second car. And there wasn't. And then all of a sudden, a light changes yellow because it's on a sensor. And we missed the whole light. And it's like a 5-minute light. It was on it, looking at the phone. I was beeping on the horn and come on, man.
Yeah. And when you talk about raising healthy teenagers, I mean, I remember going through that stage, and I know teenagers have a tendency to drift away from the parents as they're, getting older, finding their independence and, so forth. How can we as parents raise healthy teenagers? And really, when should we start with those patterns to make sure when they get to that teenage years that they have a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, so I wrote last year when I did this next book, The Teenagers, which released in February from the publisher. You write in a book, you got to come up with ideas. Of course, I didn't want it to be all about because that's what Disconnected is about. I went through, and it was sort of like an obstacle course that our kids are up against right now. These dangers and pitfalls, everything, right? So how much I try to avoid it, it seems like, screen time and everything else plays such a big role into the childhood obesity epidemic. They're targeted through social media. I talk about the social skills deficit, right? From kids being locked up in COVID and have fallen behind with social skills and emotional skills and all stuff. And the book, it just continues to traverse into all of these things that our kids are up against. Even schools and happening in schools and so forth. And, things are being taught to kids that some disagree with, rather than focusing on specifically on academics and math and school and anxiety, school phobia issues that are now rampant, since COVID-19. And I even go into, into the college, application, and college's, frenzy that these kids get themselves into for no reason other than they're just being sold a bag of goods. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you got to get into this school or that school. So it's just so many things, that our kids are up against. That's what the book really explores and helps parents, sort of navigate these obstacles, right? And your kids on. Another big thing is just outdoor play, green time versus screen time, and how important that is. Getting the kids outside and the family being part of that. And outdoor play, activates something like 3,000 genes in the executive functioning part of the brain. All the research shows that kids that are play saturated outside are much better off mental health wise.
I would agree without a doubt. Because you look at the kids when you were growing up and I was growing up, we were outside. We were using our brain to experiment, to discover, and to do different things. And when you're sitting there on a phone or a smart device, or on social media, you know, it really screws up a kid's head. And I know
Yeah.
social media is really making it harder on teenagers, and I think that's one reason we have more suicides in
Oh yeah,
teenagers.
100%. Since
Yeah.
2012, Mike, when smartphones became mainstream,
Uh huh.
since 2012, the mental health epidemic among our kids has gone like this, and the suicide rate has skyrocketed. And it's consistent with when smartphones came out. So while we're on that topic, like me, growing up as a kid, right? I grew up in a
Mm-hmm.
very blue collar neighborhood. My parents were poor. Had four kids by 25 years old. So we didn't know though. We just, we didn't have many means. We had a house. My mom would cook every night and so forth. But if I wanted a basketball, my parents couldn't just go get me a basketball. I had to wait till Christmas, stuff like that. So very
Mm-hmm.
early, we didn't have much. But what we did have was loving parents, very, Catholic family I grew up in, and a great neighborhood where we were outside all day. My friends that I grew up with since I'm in diapers are still my best friends to this day,
Hmm.
like 50 years later, right? Um, and so we didn't, what did we know? All we knew is, all right, we're going to go play football, basketball, ride our bikes all over the place, right? And just have fun, right? Go to
Yeah.
McDonald's and so forth. Now, kids today, like I mentioned earlier, they're on a device 8 or 9 hours a day, getting lured into TikTok and all this other stuff, right? And in this next book, Raising Healthy Teenagers, I talk about something that I call fear-filled nation. All right. So many kids are so anxious to just do anything, right? To go out, to go to school, right? Everything is triggering anxiety. And the reason is that these modern day weapons of mass destruction, these smartphones, where all that information is coming through,
Mm-hmm.
is all this bad stuff. Everything's caught on camera. Every street corner has a camera. Everybody has a camera in their pocket. And every bad thing that happens is sent right to the mainstream media and funneled right into the tailpipe of the mainstream media, social media. And where does that stuff go? Directly into our kids' very, very malleable brains. And they're doing this for 8 or 9 hours a day, just getting all this stuff. So of course it's going to trigger anxiety. Of course it's going to trigger fear, even
Mm-hmm.
violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even anger, because you become desensitized. If you're seeing violence all the time, your brain is going to gradually think that that's normal and that it's okay to act violently or inappropriately or oppositionally.
And I'm really glad you said that, because I see that a lot with kids. And you look at these reality shows and how these people act on the reality shows. Unfortunately, they're teaching our kids how to act. And even though that stuff is BS and they're doing it for the camera, but our kids are looking at it and saying, "Oh, is that how I'm supposed to react? Oh, so I need to slap her, or I need to hit him, or I need to shoot him."
Yeah, I mean, think about that. So, like, thought. What is thought? I was just on Brian Kilmeade's radio show. I don't know if you know who he is. He's one of the hosts of the Fox and Friends morning show, talking
Okay.
about this yesterday. So, what is thought, right? So, thought, like, if you and I were born on a deserted island, what would we think?
Hmm.
Who know? We wouldn't know what to think, right? All we would have is like the sun, the palm trees, the beach, right?
Yep.
But so thought comes from our experiences. So if our kids are spending the majority of their waking hours on another planet called cyberspace, all this stuff is being into their minds. Their minds now actualize this stuff. It becomes their reality. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go a step further. About a year ago, just to give people an idea of how powerful and impressionable the human brain is. So about a year ago, doctors in the United States and in Europe noticed a plethora of teenage coming into their offices in motor tics, like movements,
Hmm.
like stuff, right? And they hadn't seen anything like this. What is this all coming from? They have Tourette syndrome, but they had these involuntary motor tics,
Yeah.
stuff. So they try to figure out what the heck was causing this, and you're never going to guess what caused it. All of
Wow.
the girls, every one of these girls, the common theme was that they were spending hours a day watching videos of people with Tourette syndrome. And now from seeing that, their brain began to mimic those behaviors.
Hmm.
Is
Yep.
that crazy or what?
It's crazy. I do believe it, but it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, I can't understand how our world has let our kids do this or let the world change us this way. And, generally we look at things that progression is supposed to be, we're supposed to get better, but we're actually getting worse.
Mm-hmm. So I talk about, like this younger generation, Gen Zers and millennials, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this next book, I did some research on this as well. So although they are the generation, right, that has more abundance than any other generation,
Mm-hmm.
anything they want, right at your fingertips, right? You want to see a movie, bang, hit a button, there it is. You want to have a cup of, it delivers to your house, right? So they have so much abundance, right? They have everything compared to previous generations, right? And the biggest advocators of tolerance in society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet they're the most unhappy in history and the most least tolerant in history. Think about that, and it's, where's that coming from? Where's that coming from? Well,
Yeah.
they're living in a different planet.
And I think for a lot of us, in human nature wise, we gravitate to negativity. So if we can have access to that on a daily basis, 24/7, we are going to be affected, and we are going to start acting that way because that's what we know.
Well, and another thing too, there's been an assault on God, right, in America,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
You look at, like, one nation under God, right? Even on the back of it says, I think it says that, one nation under God, or God we trust. So it's basically like, so America, and it's not really even a religious thing. Like, I always look at it like I'm Catholic, but I'm not out preaching religion to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about this in the next book, actually, because I did some research. So this generation is the generation from any sort of spiritual or religious context, right? So they don't have that in their life, right? So society has, been hijacking God from America, right? And I was thinking about that, like, what does this create? Does it just create, moral free floaters that don't have any, that there's not anything that they believe in, or that they don't have to hold themselves accountable to? I liken it to this, right? So, when God, what does God represent? And again, you don't even have to be religious.
Mm-hmm.
So God represents good, right? It's good, right? And the opposite of that is evil, right? So what is darkness? In real, darkness is the absence of light. That's all it is. So what is evil? The absence of God, and in this case, goodness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we keep stripping society, you see what's happening right now. And I've got some, some interesting stats in the book about that.
Wow. And I have to agree. I see it and I get frustrated because I see how our kids are turning out today and how these teenage kids are. And it really frustrates me because we can, as parents, we've got to do better. As a nation, we got to do better. And when we're looking at, the technology that we're being thrust down our throat, from the TVs that they can watch you instead of you watching it, your phones. If you don't think that people are listening to what you're saying that wasn't invited to the conversation, you're losing your mind. Because if you just pay attention to the fact that if you Google something, do you know that ad comes up? And
Oh yeah.
And I can tell you, for me, I noticed it because on my TV, I might say, what about, I want to look at YouTube and see about building something. I get that on my phone.
Oh yeah.
And it's
those are the
like,
algorithms.
Yeah. And the algorithms are fine, but technology is going too far and it's really affecting our kids. But that's just, I'm gonna say that, and I know some people don't agree, but I really don't care, because if you really look at what's happening to our kids, you can. But what are some ways that we can raise healthy teenagers, going forward?
Yeah. So what we need to do, like, so again, and it really just seems, everything seems to fall back onto screen time, right? So we have to, like, as parents, we have to make sure that when we are home with our kids, we put our devices down and so forth. I mean, it's fine if you want to sit together and watch TV or Netflix. That's good. It's not, you're not hypnotized deeply into this, dark web, right? So we have to do that. We have to have conversations with our kids. We have to bring back, family dinner and so forth. Parents that have younger kids, you have to get them out of the house. You don't want them, as young kids, to be spending all of their time, their free time, just by themselves on a screen. Get them, go to play groups, call other parents up. Kids by nature, that's how they're going to learn social skills. It's how they're going to learn emotional regulation, by being on the playground, scraping their knees, having the toy stolen from them from another kid. That's how we develop as social emotional beings. Kids have to be out there starting at a young age. Otherwise, they're not going to develop those skills. And then when our kids start to get towards like the middle school years and so forth, when they're starting to put more pressure on us, we have to stand our ground. All right. And I always say that the most important word in the parental vocabulary is the word no. Here's an example. I'm lecturing. If I got 500 parents in front of me, I will say this at a lecture. I'll say, raise your hand if you think it is smart for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. Never once has a parent ever raised their hand, right? Yet. And then I'll go on to say, okay, great. So we all agree it's a bad idea, right? Yeah, it's not a good idea for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. Yeah. Well, the average age of first smartphone issuance is 10 and a half years old. So probably 70% of you in the audience right now that think it's a bad idea, you've already purchased a smartphone for your kid.
Yeah.
Right? That's a whole other topic. It's called social conformity. But we have to say no. We have to be the last person standing. Our kids are just going to want to do what everybody else is doing. And we have to just, we're in charge of them. We can't allow society anymore to dictate, what our behaviors are going to be towards our kids. And above all, we have to love our kids. We have to show them emotional affection. We have to tell them that we're proud of them. We have to allow them to fail and learn from that, and help them to understand, what it means to be a leader in society, somebody who's going to take a different path and not fall in line and follow what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, because you see a lot of that. People just follow what everybody else is doing. There's no independency in our kids today, and that's a shame.
It's a fear too. Yeah, it's like a fear. Parents are afraid, like, oh my God, if my kid doesn't have a phone, when he's 10 or 11, he's going to be the only one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah.
So what? They're not ready for it yet. They're not ready to have a phone at 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah, and they're not. And there's things that they can get into at 10 or 11 on that smartphone is not conducive for them to grow up.
So here's a question that people ask me all the time, Mike. Parents will say, well, what is the right age? What is the appropriate age to get my kid a smartphone? So my answer is, when you feel comfortable with your child watching pornography.
That's a great answer.
That's just the reality of it. They're going to get sucked into that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Well, Tom, how, unfortunately, this is coming to our time, but I have really enjoyed talking with you, and I know I could do more, but I got to be respectful of your time as well, because I could keep going. But how can our audience get in touch with you, and also how can they get your books? Yeah,
so the books, both are anywhere both you can get it, right? Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. The new book, Raising Healthy Teenagers, is available for pre-order. So you can buy it wherever books are sold, right? I suggest you do that. And then, more information about me is my website, www.tomkirsting.com. So I'm currently having it rebuilt right now because the other one's outdated. So if people want to be on my mailing list, because I'm trying to grow that because I have good content to send to people, not on a daily basis. Anybody that's listening right now with your phone, and this is where tech thing, if you text the word reconnect, the number 66866, you'll be put on my mailing list, and you'll get a point too of that I use at my lecture. Yeah.
Okay.
That's really it.
Okay. That's great, because I employed these parents out here and soon to be parents to read your book, because the disconnected is, you've got to read it, because we have really got to disconnect our kids from these phones and don't get them started with it in the first place. And raising healthy teens, if you are a parent and your kid is about to hit the teenage years or in the teenage years, you've got to read this, because
that's right.
We can't do better if we don't know better. And your kids can't do either. If they don't know any better, they can't do better.
That's right. That's right.
And that's that. And I tell parents all the time, we're their number one example.
We are, no question about it. We are. That's it. I mean, we are their role. They won't tell us, but we are their role model, and we are their example. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, it's been a pleasure. I love what you were saying, and I also learned something today, because ODD, never heard of it, but I heard of it last week for the first time, but I'd like to know more about it as well. But I really thank you for coming on the show. I thank you for the work that you're doing, and I pray that you just continue to keep on doing it, and God keep blessing you to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really thank you for coming and joining us with Tom. And Tom Kirsting is a great writer. Like I said, psychotherapist. He has his own practice. You got to check him out. And if you are a parent, I don't care if you're a father or a mother, as a parent, you need to understand what you are doing to your kids. Those little simple things that you let your kids get away with, you think it's not going to harm them, it's not going to mean anything, but we have got to look to the future and look at what that could mean to your child in the future. And Tom mentioned something that I want to repeat, and I said is we got to mean what we say, and he might not have said it, but I'm going to say it. Mean what we say and say what we mean, because when you say it, you got to stick to it. As a good parent, you got to mean what you say and watch what you say to your kids, because it is important. And watch how you act in front of your kids. That is even just as important, because we're teaching our kids every day how to be a human being. And if you're not the best version of yourself, you really can't expect your child to be. And if they turn out to be, you are very blessed and very lucky. So, but ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming. And if you have not subscribed to our show, please go to The Father Show with Mike Thompson on our YouTube channel and hit that subscription button. And while you're there, hit the like button. And you can always hear this episode and other episodes on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and other apps. So you can get this and listen to it as you're driving to work, coming home, sitting out, cutting your grass. Put your headphones on and listen to what Tom has to say. So until we see you next week, don't forget also, if you need resources, go to thefathershowwithmikethompson.com, click on the resource button, and there you will find national and statewide resources. And I hope to get Tom information on our website as well, so that way you have another way to find him and his books, because you really need to get them. So until I see you next week, God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week.